Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's web conference. Welcome to the ISO. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We will provide you with instructions on how to ask a verbal question at that time. You are also welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To submit a written question, please use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Choose All Panelists from the Send to drop-down menu. With that, I'll turn the call over to Heidi Carter, Senior Client Trainer. Heidi, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Lindy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the California ISO class. Today is a quarterly webinar that we offered. It's scheduled for 2 hours, and it's intended to provide an introduction to the organization known as the California ISO, or Independent System Operator. So throughout the day, I'll be calling this the ISO. Like Lindy said, my name is Heidi Carter. I'm one of the client trainers here in the Customer Readiness Group, and I'll be the one that's facilitating our discussion today. Typically, the audience members for this training come from a broad spectrum of interested parties. So we have newcomers from various sectors of the electric industry. We've got public officials, regulators, sometimes concerned citizens, as well as ISO veterans who may already be familiar with various ISO functions. So on behalf of the ISO, we're very glad that you've joined us and hope that you get some good information at a very high level out of this presentation today. So let's take a look at the primary topics we will touch on today. These topics are intended to be high level to give you a general understanding of the ISO and its functions. And you're going to be pointed to where you may find more information on a deeper level on items that might be impactful for you. This webinar is being recorded, so if you would like to hear this webinar again, or if you think it would be helpful to others in your organization, it will be posted on our Learning Center webpage in approximately 3 to 5 business days. And there's a link to our Learning Center that you see on there. I'll also show you what that page looks like later in the presentation. Along with this recorded webinar will be the slides that will include several links, as well as many other computer-based training courses that you'll find on our Learning Center that will offer you a deeper dive into the information that we're covering today. There will be breaks during the discussion when the operator will open the phone lines for verbal questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation that you've addressed, you can also put those in the chat, and the moderator will read those on behalf, again, during that Q&A section. If I'm not able to answer your questions right away today, we will be tracking those questions, and I will research that information and make sure that I send it out to everyone who's registered on today's call. All right, so let's start talking about what an independent system operator is. We are an independent system operator, but what does that mean? What is an ISO? In North America, an ISO is a federally regulated regional organization which coordinates, controls, and monitors the operation of the electric power system. It also acts as a marketplace for wholesale power. So similar to a stock exchange, the ISO never actually owns or takes title to any of the energy that is purchased and sold. The ISO marketplace acts only as the mechanism to bring buyers and sellers of energy and energy services together. So as you can see, this map of North America, there are several different energy regions, and though they all have the same goal of maintaining reliability and market efficiency, they all run a little different. The California ISO is one of 9 independent system operators, or regional transmission operators, RTOs, that are in North America, and we all participate in the ISO RTO Council that's committed to work to build a smarter and more efficient grid that is prepared to meet North American market and consumer needs. Approximately 2/3 of the U.S. and more than half of Canada are served by independent grid operators. The The California ISO resides in the regional area known as the Western Interconnection and is the 5th largest of the ISO RTOs in terms of installed generation and miles of transmission lines, and is 3rd in the list in terms of population served. So again, during this course, we will be focusing on the California ISO and its processes, but it's important to note that if you are doing work with several other ISOs, it is important to be aware of the differences in how we all operate and the terminology used so that you will be successful and benefit in your interactions with the different ISOs. So on the previous slide, I mentioned that the California ISO resides in the Western Interconnection, which is represented here, as well as being an ISO. We are also a balancing authority, or BA. A balancing authority area, or BAA, is a combination or set of intertie points and resources, and the balancing authority is responsible for matching generation and load while maintaining the electrical frequency of the grid. There are 39 separate VAs in the West, each with the same core functions of preparing the system for next day using resources within its boundaries, as well as taking into account imports from neighboring VAs and matching changing supply with changing demand in real time. The California ISO is registered as a balancing authority and is the largest of 39 VAs in this region, handling an estimated 36% of electric load in the Western Interconnection. While all ISOs are BAs, not all balancing authorities are ISOs. An ISO typically has a competitive energy market, which most of the balancing authorities do not have. Utilities sit inside of a BA, which is responsible for reliably planning and operating the grid that encompasses utility service territories. BAs may have one or more utilities within their boundaries, which may be investor-owned utilities, or IOUs, or else they may be public utilities, and sharing these resources throughout the interconnection enables us to enhance reliability through greater resource pools, achieve renewable generation targets, and manage costs. Electronic tagging, or e-tagging, tracks the energy that is scheduled to flow between these various balancing areas. E-tags contain data that allow us to model where the energy is being produced and consumed and what transmission lines are being utilized for reliability and settlement purposes. To achieve this, continual communication between the BAs is critical. It's important to help us maintain situational awareness of grid efficiency. For more information regarding the functions of an ISO and a balancing authority, we had just released a new computer-based training course, or CBT, and it's titled ISO Orientation. It offers a brief overview of what the functions of an ISO are and how we fit into the industry. So if you're interested in that, you'll see that link at the bottom of the page, and when these slides are posted later today, you'll be able to click on that link and go view that. So like many other ISOs, the California is a nonprofit public benefit corporation. We are responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of consumers, but unlike a public utility, we're profit neutral. We're independent, and we do not serve the end-use customers. We operate the transmission system, but not the distribution lines, those lines that go into your buildings, into your homes. Those are operated and maintained by the utilities, who also perform the maintenance on generators and transmission systems. Also, unlike the utilities, we do not own any transmission or generation assets, and we do not take ownership of the energy on the system. We do, however, coordinate the maintenance of these grid facilities to ensure that there are sufficient resources available to meet the needs of the customers. That goes back to the situational awareness, having a better understanding of what's happening throughout the grid. It's our resolve to facilitate a fair and transparent wholesale electricity market, and we accomplish that through our policies, planning, and initiatives. We have a comprehensive transmission planning process to accommodate the need for system expansion, as well as clearing the way for clean, green resources to access the grid. We are active in driving ambitious environmental and regional goals with more distributed and clean power products. So what kind of oversight do we have? Like I said before, the ISO is a balancing authority where you have a balancing authority area. We're a transmission and infrastructure planner and a facilitator of a competitive wholesale power market. In order to be successful, we must coordinate with several entities at various levels and adhere to strict oversight. The agencies that regulate us are FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which is the independent U.S. federal entity that is the regulator of our market, and as such has jurisdiction over interstate electricity sales, wholesale electric rates, natural gas and oil pipeline rates, reliability standards for the bulk power system, etc. So pertinent FERC rules are codified in our tariff so that any wholesale exchange of electricity in our market comes under the purview of FERC. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, is the international regulatory authority whose mission is to assure the reliability and security of the bulk power system in North America. NERC's major responsibilities include working with all stakeholders to develop standards for power system operations, monitoring and enforcing compliance with those standards, assessing resource adequacy on a broad scale, and providing educational and training resources as part of an accreditation program to ensure power system operators remain qualified and proficient. They also work with the North American Energy Standards Board, or NASB, to develop standards, including e-tagging standards. The Western Electricity Coordinating Council, or WEC, is a nonprofit corporation responsible for coordinating and promoting bulk electric system reliability in the geographic area known as the Western Interconnection, which we talked about and then looked at a couple slides back. A reliability coordinator is an entity with the highest level of authority responsible for the reliable operation of the high voltage system and complying with federal and regional grid operation standards. Reliability coordinators, or RCs, have a wide area view of the bulk electric system and have the authority to prevent or mitigate emergency operations in day-ahead and real-time operations that may be beyond the operational awareness of individual transmission operators. The RC also provides leadership in system restoration following a major event, such as a blackout. In order to reduce costs, promote efficiency, connect more renewable resources, and help other entities in the West to modernize their systems, the ISO is in the certification process to become an RC. We plan to stand up RC services by spring of 2019, and we're currently working with a wide range of stakeholders to establish processes, procedures, rates, the applications that they're going to be using, etc. So updates where we are at in this process can be found on our website, and you see the link there on the page. Now let's talk about how the ISO is structured. So we are governed by a 5-member board whose members are appointed by the Governor of California. We actually have a couple new ones that are just coming in. Each member serves a 3-year term, and these terms are staggered. Our internal Department of Market Monitoring reports directly to our board. They are responsible for analyzing market trends and working with FERC enforcement to identify potential anti-competitive market behavior or market inefficiencies. They also review ISO market design initiatives to ensure that the market remains competitive. In order to provide transparency, the DMM, or Department of Market Monitoring, produces regular reports that are available to anyone that wants to look at those on our website. Our Board of Governors also receives reports from the Audit Committee, which has oversight of the ISO's budget and financial operations, while the Market Surveillance Committee provides the Board with independent oversight of the markets. The EIM governing body is ancillary to the Board of Governors and exercises delegated authority from the ISO Board of Governors over Western Energy Imbalance Market, or EIM, rules. There is also a body of state regulators, and this includes representation from 8 states that are responsible for advising EIM governing body and ISO board on matters of interest, as well as a regional issues forum that is the public vehicle for stakeholders to discuss EIM-related issues, including impacts to neighboring balancing authority areas. Our president and CEO is Steve Berberick. Our market and infrastructure development team works on market design and the development of grid infrastructure. The market quality and renewable integration looks at market performance and integrating renewables into the market. The technology or IT division manages the market and system applications, as well as all of our corporate applications. Our operations division maintains reliability, runs the market, and manages the processes from bid to bill. Or in other words, from the bids that are submitted all the way through our settlements processes. The General Counsel Division is our legal group that works on the ISO tariff and is the group that interacts with FERC, NERC, WEC, and other agencies when it comes to filings, compliance, and regulations. Our Human Resources Division manages corporate training, organizational development, compensation, and all personnel-related activity. The division run by our CFO and treasurer is responsible for the ISO's financial planning, procurement, and acts as the company's financial controller. Customer and State Affairs interacts with our external customers on everyday questions as well as forward-looking policies. Our Customer Readiness team, which I'm a part of, is part of the Customer and State Affairs organization, which is part of this group. Regional and Federal Affairs engages in externally at the regional level, working on forward-looking policy, looking at EIM-related activities, regional integration, et cetera. There's a lot of outreach with the different states so that we can work together better to make a more efficient grid. So with all the functions of the ISO, it is imperative that these boards, committees, and departments work effectively together to make sure that we serve the needs of our consumers and our customers. Though we are not a state agency, we work with these agencies to implement state policy, perform studies, facilitate a fair and transparent wholesale electricity market, and drive innovation. The Air Resources Board mission is to promote and protect public health, welfare, and ecological resources through the effective and efficient reduction of air pollutants while recognizing and considering the effects on the state's economy. One of their main focuses is limiting greenhouse gas emissions through the programs that utilize renewable energy credits. Generators can purchase renewable energy credits, or RECs, in order to offset their air emissions and continue to operate their facilities. The focus of the Energy Commission is on the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, that is currently set at 50% of total energy procurement from eligible renewable energy resources by 2030, and the ISO is active in working to help them achieve this goal. We also work with the California Senate and Assembly to effect change in the energy industry. The Water Resources Control Board is focusing on once-through cooling issues. We have a number of generators in California that are close to the coast and use seawater to aid in the conversion process of condensing steam back into water. This can have a detrimental effect on marine habitats. The Water Resources Control Board is coordinating a long-term effort with resources to find alternative ways to cool their plants or possibly retire them. The ISO also works with the Public Utilities Commission on resource adequacy, making sure that there are sufficient resources that can supply the energy we need, and generation procurement. Resource adequacy is a way that the PUC assures that load-serving entities, or LSEs, have procured sufficient resources to cover their expected load in the upcoming year. The Integrated Resource Plan is an umbrella planning proceeding to consider all of the Commission's electric procurement policies and programs and ensure that California has a safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity supply. As I mentioned before, though we're not a state agency, we want to help shape policies that affect our customers and grid operations that may impact reliability. So it's of great benefit for us to work closely with these entities inside California as well as the entities that serve these roles in other states outside of California. But we don't just work with regulatory agencies, oversight board, and state agencies. A partner that is critical to our success are our stakeholders. It's you. Stakeholder input is essential to ISO planning processes and for the success of new initiatives from policy development to implementation. Therefore, we encourage you to participate in our stakeholder engagement opportunities. It's critical that you get involved, that you have an understanding of what's going on and have a voice in helping to shape these policies. On our website, under the Stay Informed tab, you will find information on our stakeholder process. This page lists all of the initiatives that we're working on at the ISO and provides all of the papers, the meeting schedules, etc. for those initiatives should you be interested in participating in the discussion. We're committed to providing ample chances for stakeholder input into our market design, implementation, and infrastructure planning activities. The stakeholder process will shape the market design and policies through a series of proposals, meetings, and comment periods, including any changes to our tariff. So when we mentioned tariff, there's a lot of documentation that guides us, and a great deal of that documentation that we adhere to from a reliability and safety standpoint is defined by federal and regulatory standards. Our primary document is our tariff, which outlines the rates, terms, and conditions under which the ISO operates. The tariff is modified in collaboration with our stakeholders and approved by FERC. To view our tariff and associated filings in a more user-friendly way, you can visit our eTariff viewer that offers convenient access to all ISO-related files that are part of FERC's eTariff system. We also have business practice manuals, or BPMs, and because the rules in the tariff can be high level at times, our BPMs provide detailed rules, procedures, and examples for the administration, operation, planning, and accounting requirements of the California ISO and the markets that are consistent with the ISO tariff. Adherence to the manuals is important for orderly operation of the ISO market. To ensure accuracy and clarity of the BPMs, we have a systematic and publicly transparent change management process called our Proposed Revision Requests, or PRRs, which include monthly meetings to discuss submitted change requests. Those change requests can come from internal sources as well as external participants. We also have operating procedures which guide the critical step-by-step actions of control room tasks. Some of these procedures are posted under the rules section of our website, while others that may give away proprietary information about the grid would be private, and those are confidential. But there are some of the procedures that are general enough that they can be found on our website. All right, we've covered a lot. We've talked about what the ISO is, our structure and functions, and now we're going to take a few minutes to open the line for your questions. Lindy, would you be able to give call-in instructions as well as read any questions via the chat at this time?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move to Q&A, please feel free to place yourselves into the question queue by pressing pound 2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted, and at that time, please then state your name and question. Also, to submit a written question, please use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Choose All Panelists form in the, Send to drop-down menu. Our first question in the chat today, what are your green goals?
Our green goals are, and I've got a slide about it in a couple of minutes, as far as the renewable portfolio standards. It's moving towards having 100% of a trajectory to meet 100% carbon footprint-free energy supply by 2045. So when those are set by the California legislature, then we look at how we can achieve that. We also, we want to look at a variety of resources to use, and we work closely, do studies to look at what are new technologies that are out there, what are the goals that are set by the state of California, those different entities that I mentioned before, the CPUC, the CEC, and then we work with them and also give them some information back about the grid and reliability and what could be achievable. So that whatever our green goals are, those are hand in hand with what's happening at the state level.
Thank you. Our next question is the CAL-ISO/BAA market growing in scope, taking on new areas?
The ISO, we do have our EIM, our energy imbalance market, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes when we're talking about about our markets in particular, but that is a way of reaching out and working with other states and other balancing authority areas so that we can use the different resources in these different balancing authority areas and, within the states, even within California, within the Western Interconnection, so that we can have more reliable operations, so that we can capitalize on using more of that green energy or the surplus energy that the different states have. So it just gives us a bigger resource pool to work from. So when we get a little further, you're going to see what our footprint looks like now as the California ISO, and then what our footprint looks like with the EIM included as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
At this time, there are no further questions in queue.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. We'll go ahead and continue now. So far we've explained a little bit about who the ISO, and now let's take a look at what we do. The ISO is registered with NERC as a balancing authority and also a transmission operator, transmission service provider, planning coordinator, and a market operator. And each one of these roles have certain standards that we have to adhere to. So together these roles are grouped into our core functions: infrastructure planning, reliability, and market operations. So let's go ahead and look at each one of those in a little more depth. Start with planning. As our industry moves into the future, we face challenges and competing priorities. Reliability is the foremost grid consideration, but it's not the only consideration. As more renewables and green power products are added into the power mix, as we expand our horizons, we face challenges related to under or oversupply and the need for more flexibility. When there is more electricity being generated than places to store or export it, or when there's too little supply, it could affect the reliability of the grid. The bottom line is that there are a lot of things we want to do, but there are cost, time, and impact considerations. Therefore, it's critical we coordinate with several entities to plan the transmission needs of the ISO balancing authority area. So this is kind of a follow-up to the question before. So originally, our transmission planning process was underway to have us meet 33% renewable portfolio standard, or RPS, by 2020. However, as a leader in the use of renewable resources, including solar, wind, California set the bar higher to achieve the goal of 50% RPS by 2030. So we're on track to meet that. But then recent California legislation has put us on a trajectory to meet 100% carbon footprint-free energy supply by 2045. And right now we look at the resources that we have. Again, a lot of that comes in from the solar and the wind. But who knows by 2045 what other kinds of green energy that's being developed may be incorporated in this. So there's a lot of changes going on in our industry. So we keep an eye on that and we work with these agencies to achieve this. So the transmission lines, that requires a lot of planning. And transmission planning at the ISO is an open and transparent process that actively engages stakeholder and public input and uses the best engineering analysis possible to determine short and long-term infrastructure needs of the ISO transmission grid, which is comprised of over 26,000 circuit miles, because the whole point of that is to maintain reliability and bring economic benefits to our consumers. The ISO works closely with the CPUC and the CEC throughout the transmission planning process to identify and study reliability, policy-driven, and economically driven needs. So we look at what the system can handle, if it needs to be re-rated, if we need new infrastructure, and how it impacts the different communities. If they're going to be negative or positive, we look at all of those different impacts. Our transmission planning process begins annually and lasts 15 months. This process has two phases for project definition and evaluation, and a possible third for competitive solicitation for selected products. So again, in that phase one, that's when we're developing forward-looking assumptions. We're doing a lot of different studies. In phase two, we're performing analyses and identifying what those transmission needs are, what changes need to be made. And if approved by the ISO board in phase three, we select proposals to build needed transmission projects. But again, a lot of these are being studied. Some of these plans are very far out. So when we go through this transmission planning process, not only are we thinking about bringing on new lines, like I said, we could be just re-rating the lines, how much the lines can handle, what the output is. We could be retiring lines, and we could also be looking at proposals that were accepted, but based on political changes, based on the needs, maybe an area doesn't need as much transmission. Some projects may also be canceled. So again, we're looking at the economy of it, policies, and reliability for any decisions that we make in the transmission planning process. And there are frequent meetings. You can find information about the transmission planning process, and there are frequent meetings that go over what is in each one of the plans. And you can find information from past transmission planning processes in there as well. So that's the transmission. That's getting the power to the different facilities. But just like we have a transmission planning process, we also have a robust generator interconnection process to help resources that provide the electricity, provide the energy. We help those resources interconnect to the ISO grid. Our streamlined process helps power plants understand the steps to interconnecting their resource to the ISO grid by providing requirement compliance information, as well as having an assigned interconnection specialist to walk the entity through the entire process from the beginning through commercial operations, and that's usually within 7 years. While you're working with the ISO along this path from the initiation of the request to your commercial operation date, you will simultaneously be working with the appropriate organizations and agencies necessary to secure your permits perform engineering studies, procure equipment, construct your facility, etc. So let's take a high-level look at this process. So at a high level, the generator interconnection process starts when a resource submits a request to interconnect. This kicks off the generator interconnection study to determine reliability impacts to the system and identifies any upgrades that may need to be made. This study process can take up to 2 years. So after the studies and approval to move forward are granted, the interconnection agreements are signed, and then the new resource implementation or NRI process begins. So once this process begins, or once this process is complete, the resource can begin participating in the market. So there's no typical time frame for this process. However, projects should be able to be commercially operating within 7 years from the date the interconnection request was received by the ISO. A very important note, this is a very, very simplified version of this, but a very important note that if you are someone that's going to be connecting or planning to connect a resource to the grid, it's very important to adhere to the deadlines. And the ISO has little to no leeway regarding these timelines, so it's very important to keep all projects moving forward, and as many projects or processes are linked and they feed into one another. But one of the main tasks of that interconnection specialist that I mentioned on the last slide is to make sure that the projects in the queue and the process are moving along and the interconnection customers are meeting their dates, because we want you to be successful. We want to make sure that the generator resources can be interconnected in an efficient manner. If you'd like to find out more information about how the resources are interconnected, we do have an annual resource interconnection fair. This is an educational forum, and it's intended to help participants understand the process involved in connecting resources to the California ISO grid. The next one we have scheduled is Wednesday, February 27th. So if you go to our website, under the calendar, you can go ahead and click on that again on Wednesday, February 27th, and sign up for our resource interconnection fair. All right, we're going to stop again and see if anyone has any questions about our planning process.
Yes, and we do have another question in the chat. Our next question is, what are the major outputs, reports, etc., from the transmission planning process?
There are quite a few documents that come out during that transmission planning process presentation, that meeting. There are several slides that list all the different projects that have been proposed, that are still in the queue, that are upcoming, and it looks at all of those and gives the feasibility information on each one of those. So that's the biggest thing that comes out of it, is a report, and it just goes bit by bit. There's kind of an overall summary of the process itself, but then there's details about each one of the projects and the data from the study. Next question.
There are no further questions in the chat. I will remind anyone over the phone, if you would like to ask a verbal question, please dial #2 to add yourself into the queue. At this moment, there are no further questions in the chat.
Okay. All right, then we'll go ahead and move on. We just talked about our planning, but another one of our focuses, we're responsible for the constant and reliable flow of electricity for the health, safety, and welfare of our consumers. Maintaining reliability is a balancing act that requires a lot of expertise in controlling many moving parts. So what is reliability? In short, it's all about keeping the lights on and keeping our system our system operations is at the forefront of this task. Our operators are responsible for maintaining the reliability of the grid by balancing supply and demand using various resource types. Operators are located in 2 control centers which are continuously connected in real time through instant video conferencing capability. Both control rooms are operated 24/7, and though Folsom is the primary control room, Lincoln is sharing duties so that the entire operation of the grid can be transferred between control rooms at any time. There are multiple redundancies on all systems, providing one of the highest levels of dependability in computer system operations. So as one of the NERC requirements, it is necessary for each control room to have a backup center, but instead of having our Lincoln as a backup center, it's running in parallel so that, like I said, it can easily cut over so that we can maintain that reliability. As mentioned in the last slide, reliability of the electric grid is a primary focus. Electricity is produced, delivered, and consumed at nearly the speed of light, and throughout this process, the goal is to maintain grid frequency at 60 hertz to keep the system operating smoothly. Electricity is produced by the supply, which consists of generation and imports that may include solar, wind, natural gas, hydroelectric, etc. Electricity is then delivered via transmission and distribution lines and then consumed by the demand, which is the load and exports. So that demand, that load is you and I. When we turn on our lights, when we turn on our toasters, etc. So greater diversity of resources strengthens our ability to meet demand. However, it also causes its own set of challenges when it comes to planning, forecasting, availability, and especially of renewables or variable energy resources, such as wind and solar. Operators utilize detailed models of the system and advanced applications for situational awareness to identify which resources are available and how the system is loaded in order to maintain that balance. So there's a lot of monitoring that goes on. Our applications are taking that pulse of the grid every few seconds to know what's happening, looking for congestion, looking for any kind of issues. We take into account outages if we're expecting a resource to be able to produce a certain amount of electricity and it's no longer available. Our operators and our systems are looking at other alternatives that can replace whatever's lost. And it takes a lot of coordination, and in order to make sure that the system is running as seamlessly as possible. So we need to maintain this balance, but how is it that we know what kind of resources we need so that we can maintain that balance? We use demand forecasts, which allow us to know how much energy will be needed in real time to meet load requirements. So the ISO must project how much energy will be needed and how much will be available for the next day, the day after that, next week, next month, next year, even a couple years out, and we do that through robust forecasting practices. So the more accurate data we have, the more accurate the demand forecast. So you can see a couple of examples there where if we have less information on the top, you can see that the actual and the published, what actually flowed, were very far apart. But as we have more information, more data, more historical data that we can use, the more improved we can to accuracy that we can have to ensure that we have the right energy that's showing up for the demand. So as our industry changes, as the types of energy sources we can rely on change, we face ever-increasing challenges to predict how much energy will need to be delivered and where that energy will come from. To gather that information, we use a variety of types of forecasts, including weather, renewable production, solar and wind events. We also look at the historical data such as holidays, Super Bowl Sunday, the day after Thanksgiving, when people are traditionally putting on their Christmas lights, there's an increase in demand. So we're looking at all of that information, and we're looking at these forecasts for both short and long term in their nature to gather the most accurate data. The ISO is consistently working on improving load, wind, and solar forecasts in day-ahead, hour-ahead, and real-time, and we'll talk about those when we talk about the real-time market, in order to keep the lights on and keep the costs low for the consumers. We do have a meteorologist on site. We do have a team that actually looks at this, and they're the ones that are looking at all of these different forecast information. All right, so we'll go ahead now and we'll take another set of questions. Now that we talked about reliability, Lindy, do we have anyone that has a question?
Yes, and we do have another question. And this question is a bit delayed, my apologies. This question is, how does Cal ISO get notified of a transmission failure due to fire, storm, etc.? Is that from the provider?
We do have a lot of systems that are integrated. We have, in our control room, we actually have a map board that tracks fires. We have systems that are our full network model. We've got systems that they're looking at as well, our energy management system that will show issues that are on the grid. So our operators are monitoring these systems and looking at that. So but there's also a lot of communication where there is responsibility for the different actual providers, energy providers, to be contacting the ISO to let them know. There is an OMS, which is an outage management system. So if something's going to, if equipment's going out, they would log that into the OMS system so that we know we need to look for alternate forms of electricity, or energy. So we do have a lot of communication that's going on. Our operators have a lot of direct lines to these different providers. There are different communication protocols that need to be followed. So there is a lot of monitoring of the system, looking at the different applications that provide that information, and then also the verbal and written communication as well. Do you have any other questions?
Yes, and we do have another question in queue. If the utility calls for a public service power shutoff to prevent fire, what role does the ISO play?
Again, if there's going to be a system that's out, we would be monitoring that outage system, but it's like you said, we don't actually maintain or operate any of the lines, so we would be monitoring that. We may have to give orders to someone else, to maybe we need different resources, looking at different energy that can be used. The reliability coordinator, if it's something that's real detrimental, they may have to issue instructions on how to maintain that reliability. They may have to say that load needs to be shed or whatever. The action needs to be taken to keep the system whole, to keep it from having major issues. So, but if a public utility is, is shutting things down, we don't have that kind of a control. If they're making those decisions for the safety of their equipment, they would just be letting us know that things are not available. And it would be mainly under a forced outage at that point. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions?
Yes, and another question, who owns the transmission lines?
It's a variety of, we do not own those, so it's a variety of different companies. It might be the PTOs, the participating transmission owners. So in California, you've got, for instance, we've got PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern Cal Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. So there are different transmission owners that are, those are 3 of them in California. So they're owned and operated by different entities.
Okay. And at this time, there are no further questions in queue.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your questions. Now we're going to move on to the market. So as a registered market operator, we act as a marketplace for wholesale power, or basically a clearinghouse. The ISO has 2 markets, and those that feed into the post-market processes. So our ISO wholesale energy market is comprised of distinct day-ahead and real-time processes, which again feed into our post-market processes or our settlements process. The energy products and services traded in our market allow us to meet reliability needs and serve that load. The day-ahead energy market enables parties with bilateral agreements to schedule their contracted supply and demand into the market. They can also offload excess supply in the form of energy or ancillary services, those extra services that we need to maintain reliability, and secure pricing due to changes in load forecasts or for incremental changes in demand. Most demand is met in advance of the market through utility-owned or bilaterally procured resources. So percentage-wise, the market's actually a smaller portion when it's compared to these bilaterally procured resources and utility-owned resources. ISO's real-time energy market has has the hour-ahead scheduling process, which enables import and export resources to schedule their megawatts hourly, as well as a 15-minute market, or FMM, that allows variable energy resources, or VERS, to submit energy forecasts and decremental bids closer to the financially binding interval, and that increases the bid accuracy. Variable energy resources, those renewables like solar and wind, those are much harder to predict because you could suddenly have cloud cover that affects the solar's output. You could have the wind suddenly die down or suddenly speed up. And so the FMM allows for those bids to be a little more accurate based on a closer time frame to actually delivering the energy. The 5-minute market is intended to meet the instantaneous demand. So that's where it's truly binding, and that's where it's getting ready to flow in the next 5 minutes. That energy is getting ready to flow to provide to meet that demand. The ISO market offers a full network model that analyzes generation and transmission schedules submitted a day in advance to better manage or avoid real-time bottlenecks or congestion. The full network model is a representation of generation and the transmission in the entire Western interconnection. With this model, we're able to see where there might be constraints on the electric grid, where there might be issues. The full network model automatically runs every 15 minutes to reevaluate the impacts of actual or potential system changes. Kind of going back to that question that you had asked, that's where that situational awareness comes in, where we work with the different entities. We may see something in the system that we contact the utility, see if they are seeing the same thing. So it's all a lot about communication and coordination to make those kind of changes so that we have energy flowing when we really need it. There are different products in our market, different products and services. So there's a number of different ways to participate in the ISO market, and depending on the resource capabilities, market participants can elect to bid into the energy and ancillary service market or sell other electricity products. So there's a physical that can bid their generation, or they can bid in to purchase the energy to meet their load demands. We also have convergence bidders, and that's for bids for virtual supply or virtual demand. Those are financial positions that are taken in the day-ahead market and liquidated in the real-time market. So those go into the market optimization, and those are considered, but then they are liquidated in the real-time market, 15-minute market price, so that we can fill that back in with the actual generation. Ancillary services help maintain the reliability of the grid. Regulation up and down are capacity products designed to meet short-term changes in load. Spinning reserve is for both spin and non-spin. What that really is are operating reserves. So in case there's some kind of a contingency, some kind of a system event, these are resources that can, the regulations making the minor changes, incremental changes in short term, but then the spin and non-spin, those are actually operating reserves. Should something happen, these are resources that can be connected to the grid and synchronized at that 60 hertz and providing energy within 10 minutes. So they have to go through a process to actually be able to prove that they can provide that energy to keep the power going, to keep the lights on. Residual unit commitment is a way to ensure that the ISO procures enough capacity to meet the day-ahead forecast. The flexible ramping products provide additional upward and downward flexible ramping capacity to account for uncertainty due to demand and renewable forecasting errors in the real-time market. So it's just another stopgap to ensure that we have enough capacity so that if something happens in the grid during ramping, that we can cover that so that we have the consistent flow of energy. And we have that reserved so that we can dispatch that energy if needed. Congestion revenue rights are financial instruments. Those are made available through allocation and auction processes that enable rights to holders to manage congestion cost variability that are based on locational marginal pricing. So that's the pricing that's set during the market optimization, but then also takes into account congestion costs. That can affect how much the price goes up if energy can't get in or can't get out of a particular area. It's kind of a hedge against that. These rights are acquired primarily for offsetting those congestion costs that occur in the day-ahead market. We also have inter-SC trades, which is an optional financial service that we offer that basically helps to, for those bilateral contracts that still have to be put through the market, we can help flip that so that it doesn't result in a double payment or a double payment to yourself as well. So those are optional financials. So those are all the different, or some of the different products and services that we do offer in our market. So now let's look at a brief overview of those market timelines. We said we have a day-ahead and real-time market, and this diagram shows the relationship between the two. As you can see, they're very similar. In the day-ahead market, bids are submitted, and the market processes are run. That's when the market optimization is working. Bids clear in the market, and market results are published. So bids have to can be submitted prior to the trade date. They have to be submitted no later than 10 a.m. on the day of the day-ahead market. And then the market processes begin, and those results are published approximately 1300. When that happens, then it triggers the opening of the real-time market, which is happening 75 minutes before every hour. The awards that were given during that were published during the market results, those would then be bid into the real-time market, or base schedules would be submitted from EIM entities, letting us know what their schedules in their balancing areas are going to look like. And then there are real-time market processes that begin. The market is cleared, and then at the beginning of midpoint, of each 5-minute period, that's when the dispatches are being received and getting ready for the energy to flow. That all then feeds into our post-market process. So we're going to look at these different processes. First, we're going to break down the day-ahead market. So again, the market closes at 10 a.m. on the day before the actual trade day, the day before the energy is actually going to flow. The first item that runs is market power mitigation. That's where we're looking at if any of the resources that have been submitted bids, if there's any chance that they can exercise market power based on where they're located. We have what we call a default energy bid. The system automatically goes in there and puts the energy default bid in place of any kind of potential market power. These default energy bids are discussed and planned with our Department of Market Monitoring. There are calculations that are run, so the entity that receives that mitigated bid knows what that value is going to be. So once that's run, that kicks off the Integrated Forward Market, or IFM, and this is where the market's actually clearing. This market optimization is working. It's taking all the bid-in supply and demand, and it's optimizing to come up with the market clearing price for each interval. And an interval would count as 1 hour, coming up with that market clearing price that would be applied to everyone in that interval that received a market award. So they would all get the same energy price in our locational marginal pricing. There's that energy price that everybody would get. Prices may vary, again, based on losses, which is also part of our locational marginal pricing, or LMP calculation, or congestion. So those might end up changing prices, but the energy price that everybody who was awarded, both virtual and physical, would end up getting the same price for that interval. Once that's completed, we then run the residual unit commitment, or RUC. This is where we're looking at what the demand forecast was, what was bid in, and looking at the difference. RUC goes in then, and at that point we're also looking, we've stripped out the virtual bids, and we're just looking at the physical energy and capacity that we need to have in order to bridge that gap between what was forecast and what was bid in. And then RUC goes in and procures that energy to fill that gap. So those are the three processes, and based on that market optimization, that's what gets published in the results. That's when the different entities will see their results. If you're part of the market, and you get an award, that's going to come out in our Customer Market Results Interface, or CMRI, but then there will also be results that are published on our public site, Oasis, and I'll show you a slide on that in just a bit. So that is a real quick high-level overview of our markets. Do we have any questions about the day-ahead market? We're still going to cover the real-time market. So does anybody have questions about the day-ahead market?
Yeah, so we do have a few questions. The first, we hear about resources being bid into the market. Are these bids considered against are these bids considered against other bids? What happens to resources with losing bids?
Well, everything that gets bid in, so the resources do bid in their resources, and they bid in a quantity amount, they bid in dollar amounts, because they might have certain prices that a minimum cost that they have in order to run, they have to have a minimum price to run efficiently, or a minimum megawatt value that they're running at, or maximum. we have what we call the master file that has a lot of this information. It's all this registered information about the different resources. So all that's taken into account in the bidding process, as well as all these different bids. And yes, they are bidding against one another. And when it's going through the market optimization, the bids are blind, so no one knows who you're actually bidding against. The market is looking at that, optimizing it, so it's taking into account not just the price, but also location. There are some reliability needs that are going to be looked at, how fast the different resources can produce the energy. So there are a lot of different factors that are being optimized through the market. And that makes the decisions, that gives the awards. Unfortunately, because it is a market, there might be some people that bid in that don't get awarded. And so, but they do have the opportunity, if, let's say a resource bid in on day ahead and they did not get awarded. And sometimes it might be that maybe they put in some incorrect data into their bids. The pricing could have been way off. There are different factors, and there is a tool that they could look in. It's called our cyber tool, and they would be able to look at that information as to why they might not have been picked up. But they do have the opportunity, if they were not awarded in the day ahead, to put bids into the real time, and for the different intervals, and they go through that market optimization again. So they might have the opportunity to provide that energy in our real-time market. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, and we do have another question. How does the ISO communicate a request to the public to reduce consumption due to market constraints, such as shortage or a major shortage that puts the grid at risk?
We actually have processes. There are alerts, warnings, and emergencies. There is a page I'll show you on it's a Stay Informed page that we do have flex alerts that we will issue. We have a very active communications group that puts out public notices on Twitter and through through Twitter, we have a Facebook page, we have lots of different emails, plus we also have our ISO Today application that people can find notices on as well, and I'll show you information about that a little bit later in the presentation, but we do work with the different entities as well to get that messaging out. We also, I'll show you how to sign up for this, we have a daily briefing that you can sign up for where that kind of information can come out as well, but we do have a program for flex alerts that I'll show you where that's out. That would be a good place to take a look at. Next question?
Yes, another question. Where can we find data about ancillary service transactions?
I will show you that in a moment too. You can find information on Oasis. It's our public site. And I'm not exact, I would have to go through the tool to find what drop-down it is, but that would be the tool that you could go through to find that information unless you're actually a scheduling coordinator, you're in the market, then you would have CMRI to look for that information. Next question.
And what does it mean to, quote, unquote, clear the market?
Clearing the market is when we're taking the bids that were put in for supply against the bids for load. So we're clearing supply against demand. And that's what's going to set that market clearing price. So just your basic supply and demand, where those two cross, that is where the market clearing price is set.
Okay, and there are no further questions in queue at this moment.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on now to the real-time market. So again, we see our timeline. We're now going to talk about the real-time market. So there are several different processes that are happening in real time. And so the awards that came out of the day-ahead market, those schedules are being submitted along with the EIM-based schedules that I mentioned before that are telling, how they're balancing the VAs, how they're balancing their system. And then we have processes that are happening. We've got market power mitigation, again, that's happening in the real time. And again, this is happening every hour, 24/7. So that market power mitigation is happening, as well as short-term unit commitment. We're looking at what is going to be committed. We're looking at in this time we're looking at those resources that are coming in from the different entities, the imports and exports, those e-tags, the information on that would be coming in during this time period. So that's hourly, and then every 15 minutes we are running the RTUC, which is a real-time unit commitment. So resources are being committed during this time. Again, we have that 15-minute market that we talked about a minute ago, that where the renewables can be, that's where they're being committed because there are changes. So that's why we have that as well. So that's happening every 15 minutes along with another market power mitigation. Now, the hour-ahead scheduling process, that's embedded in RTEC, and that's the first of the 4 runs. So there are 4 different runs that are going on. So just to let you know that there is a component that's embedded in that, in the FMM and RTEC, the real-time unit commitment that's based on the hourly half. Breaking it down a little further, then we have the RTED, real-time economic dispatch. It's also called real-time dispatch, RTD. It depends on who you're talking to. If it's operations, they usually refer to it as real-time economic dispatch. There's a market power mitigation that's being run as well. Again, this is every 5 minutes. This is where we have commitments, and we're getting ready now to flow that energy in that next 5 minutes. We also have some additional processes that may run. So the MTM, STUC, RTUC, RTED, those are running every hour regardless. But we do have these other processes that may happen, real-time contingency dispatch, real-time manual dispatch, or exceptional dispatch, and those are run in the case of some kind of a contingency, where maybe something needs to be overridden. Earlier we talked about reliability. The operators are monitoring this, and those would be more on the manual side, where we need to make those changes in order to maintain grid reliability. So at that time, if it's something that's really serious, the market may be suspended, and we're just running on operations now so that they can keep the power going, they can keep everything reliable, they can maintain that frequency that we talked about. So these are optional, and prefer not to happen. We want to keep the other ones going, because usually that means we have some kind of an issue with the grid. So these processes all work together for the real-time process. And again, these are happening hourly, and the real-time market is what's fine-tuning that flow of electricity that follows the fluctuations in supply and demand. So as we're moving into the real-time market, we're looking at our updated forecast. We're begin committing those resources as necessary. And this is, again, from the time the day-ahead market schedules are posted to 75 minutes before each trade hour. And the scheduling coordinators, those bidders, they can submit bids for the real-time market. They can submit bids in the hour-ahead, 15-minute, and real-time. So how can, we talked about the different markets, and I kind of mentioned them already, but you might be asking, who can participate and how do you participate in the ISO markets? Well, anybody technically can, but you have to go through a process first. In order to participate in the ISO markets, you must be a scheduling coordinator, or you have to procure the services of a scheduling coordinator. Those are the only ones that are authorized to transact business directly with the ISO. So scheduling coordinator is an entity authorized by the ISO to buy and sell power in the ISO markets. The SCs bid and schedule their power supply into the market, or they submit the demand bids, and then based on the awards, the energy flows from the transmission system and is distributed to the customer by the local utilities. So again, these different entities, it might be a convergence bidder, it might be those generation resources, load serving entities, demand response providers, those that participate in our products or in our alerts, warning, and emergency plans to maybe reduce their usage if called upon. They're also involved in that, as well as EIM entities. And this is just a few examples of the different types of scheduling coordinators that we do have. But they all have to go through or be a scheduling coordinator in order to coordinate with the ISO before, again, that energy flows to the awards are given, and then that energy is committed to run and then be provided to the customer. So again, if an entity chooses not to become a scheduling coordinator, it would still need to contract the services of a certified SC to participate on their behalf. There is a process that you have to go through in order to become a scheduling coordinator, and this process must be completed to qualify, and it includes mandatory training. It has financial and testing requirements that need to be passed, as well as adherence to policies. There are initial work that has to be done, as well as ongoing obligations once they're certified as SCs. If you're somebody who's interested in participating in the market or becoming an SC, you can visit the ISO website or refer to the Scheduling Coordinator Certification and Termination BPM, Section 5.3 of Certification Requests. And we do have someone actually in our group in customer readiness that would walk you through the process and help you get ready to participate. Now, earlier we had the question about the market footprints and how they interact. So we've talked about the Energy Imbalance Market, or EIM. The EIM is an extension of the ISO's real-time market, and it's offered to any balancing authority area in the western area of North America. So it provides a low-cost, low-risk option that balances load and resources automatically and economically. So full market members, those that are in the ISO balancing authority area, they seamlessly participate in both the day-ahead and the real-time markets. But those that are in the energy imbalance market, at this time, participate in the real-time market only. We do have initiatives that are going forward to look at how we can change our day-ahead market processes so that these other entities in the energy imbalance market can also get some of those benefits of participating in the day-ahead market as well. So if you're interested in that, in how that's going to grow, there is an initiative, a couple different initiatives actually, that are changing what our day-ahead market's going to look like. So I would highly recommend getting into some of those meetings, those conferences, looking at the papers to find out where we're going with this. The participants, they're able, again, to submit bids, which will be utilized by the California ISO to optimize energy transfer and generation output between all the EIM participants in both 15 and 5-minute increments. So the ISO operates the only EIM in the West and uses advanced ISO market systems that automatically choose low-cost resources to reliably meet customer demand. And again, cost is a big factor, but there are other factors that are being looked at as well, based on the master file and what the resources can provide and what the system needs. So as you can see here, that was one of the questions that was asked earlier about how big is our footprint and what's our area that we're looking at, that we're increasing to. So we're still in, over a good portion of the state of California, about 80% of California, we are the balancing authority area for. But you can see there are pockets that are inside of there, such as Bank SMUD, which is here locally. It's a municipal that is actually their own balancing area. TID, Turlock Irrigation District, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, they're their own. So you see different balancing areas inside of California, but now with the energy imbalance market, we're actually reaching out, and the different locations such as Pacificor, Idaho Power, PowerX, they're becoming, we're growing our footprint just by fact of by being connected using the EIM resources. We're sharing resources across these different areas, which allows us to be better prepared to use the variable energy resources. There's a lot of different benefits. You can offload some of that power that maybe you're not using in your balancing area. You don't have to have as much capacity that's saved aside because you've got more of a pool of resources to pull from. So therefore, the different entities now can actually sell off some of that capacity, extra capacity, into the market and benefit financially. So there's a lot of good parts about us working together because, again, it's good financially because you can balance that load and potentially make more money on your resources and better savings by having a larger pool, but it also increases our reliability because we have that larger pool. So you see that we have several participants in the EIM market right now, and we have more that are planned to join in the coming years. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Do we have any questions that have come in? Talk about our, finish up on our markets, or how you participate in our markets?
Yes, so we do have one question. Can you please review again why entities and EIMs only participate in the real-time market and not day ahead?
That, at this time, is just the way that it's structured. That was the way it was set up. I would have to get a better understanding of why it was done that way. And I believe it's because traditionally when we have imports and exports, those are coming in the actual day of that the energy is being is flowing. So I believe that is the reason why it was just the real time at that point. But then as we've moved forward and we're starting to see these benefits and have more EIM entities participating, like I said, they're wanting to take advantage of more of the day-ahead pricing, and so that's where we're looking at that. But that's one I can follow up on as to why it was that way, because I'm not 100% sure why that was deemed the way that it was set up. Any other questions?
Yes. How do community choice aggregators participate in the market? Those are considered load-serving entities, and they would also have to be a scheduling coordinator. So we have had several CCAs that have come in and certified as scheduling coordinators,
And so they would just work in the market just like anybody else. They would be submitting their bids, they would submit schedules, but then they would, any bilateral contracts that they might have, they would schedule those in, and then they could also put in bids for additional load that they need served. So they would participate like any of the other scheduling coordinators in our market, but they'd have to be certified as that.
Okay. At this moment, there are no further questions in queue.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move now into the post-market processes, and that's where we're talking about the money. So each market transaction is distinct and will be accounted for separately in a stack of coded transactions and associated prices that are based on the market activity and data that's pulled from the markets. So we've got metering data that's a direct measurement of that generator or load, and so that telemetry comes in, and then it's put through a process, our settlements process, to determine what needs to be paid or what is to be paid. So that meter data is used for the billable quantities to represent the energy generated or consumed during a settlement interval. Raw data is either submitted by scheduling coordinator metered entities, or it's pulled by the ISO metered entities, and then it's processed into settlement quality meter data, which is then used in the settlement process. The biggest important thing is that meter data must be correct for accurate settlements. And we'll show you the high level of the timeline, and you'll understand why it's so important to have that accurate data, because you want to have that, you want this process to go as smoothly as possible. So what's the ISO's role in settlements? The ISO is responsible for the calculation, billing, and invoicing of charges and payments for market and transmission-related activities between market participants and the ISO. Charge codes are associated with each transaction that occurs in the market, and then these calculations are broken down on settlement statements. These are then populated on an invoice of charges to be remitted or payment advices of what the entity will be paid. Each entity will receive a series of settlement statements for each transaction that occurs in the market. Initial settlement statements are only an estimate of the final results, and marginal adjustments may need to be made several months, actually, after the trade date. So one principle to keep in mind is that the ISO market results are pretty much stacked like pancakes. So if you think about it, we've got the day ahead, we've got the 15-minute, and we've got the real-time markets. So what happens in the day ahead stays in the day ahead. Then real-time changes, so anything that happened in the day ahead is going to show up as a line item, as a market transaction, and each code that's associated will show up as a line item on the settlement statement. So that's the initial day-ahead awards. And then the real-time changes to schedules and their associated prices, those will be stacked separately for accounting purposes, and that's for both the 15-minute market and the 5-minute market. So again, any of those incremental changes to what the day-ahead was, it's not just one lump sum. It's going to show up as various line items that are associated with the different charges. Entities can review all of these market transactions on their individual settlement statements. And we'll kind of look at the timeline here about when you're going to expect to see those, when a scheduling coordinator would expect to see those. Now, timelines and adherence to the dates, it's very critical in the settling of the markets in order to make the process go smoothly, in order to avoid having payments go out for much, much longer, and avoid any kind of penalties. So we have market trading dates that are Monday through Sunday of each week. Invoices or payment advices for market transactions during set billing periods are published weekly on Wednesdays, and include market transactions from the trading dates Monday through Sunday of the week preceding the invoice. So they are due for payment by 10 a.m. on the following Tuesday. So they'll get their invoice on Wednesday, and if they have to pay, those payments must be submitted no later than 10 a.m. on the following Tuesday. Payment is then dispersed as applicable to those who get payment advices by 2 p.m. the same day, that same Tuesday afternoon. It's imperative that we get that money in as soon as possible because we need to turn around, process that, and pay those who deserve the money. So as the ISO is a not-for-profit organization, all the money that comes into the market gets dispersed back out into the market with the exception of our grid management charge, or GMC, that covers specific operating costs. So if, we always tell people if they have some kind of a disagreement with what maybe is on their settlement statements or invoices, you still need to pay those because non-payment will actually impact the others in the market. It's not against the ISO, it's the market. So we're just helping to move that money through the market to the different entities that are between those entities. So that's the invoices and payment advices, but then we also have this diagram here that at a very high level depicts the daily settlement timelines for how many times one trade date will be processed for adjustments and accurate calculations. So the T stands for trade date, and so if you look at the T plus 3B, that would be the trade date plus 3 business days. That is when an initial statement would hit the reporting system, and the next time this data will be processed for updates or changes will be on the T plus 12B. So that's when statements are kind of be coming out, and the changes between T plus 3B and T plus 12B will be based on the meter data submission, that telemetry that comes in, and that settlement quality meter data is then used to make any kind of updates to the T plus 12B. So T plus 3B would be estimates. That would be based on the information that came in and that was used during market optimization. And then we start getting more information at T plus 8B, T plus 48B, and T plus 172B. So again, that meter data is coming in from the different resources of what's being used or what was being provided, and that gets settled up into these different statements and used to make any kind of changes. So there are also subsequent statements that are published periodically thereafter, the T plus 9-month, 18-month, 33, 36. Those will be just incremental changes. They won't go back to the beginning of time, and those are necessary if there are maybe disputes, if there is data that maybe was incorrect, and that's why I said earlier that the accuracy of the data is very important, because you don't want this process to go on for a potential of 3 years if you can help it. So there may or may not be adjustments in future settlement statements, but entities will only be responsible for the amount that changes from the previous settlement statement. So again, all those incremental changes, if it's found that you still, you underpaid $1.25 based on the meter data that came in and you were a load, then you would receive an invoice to have to pay that amount on the next invoice that comes in. So it would just be that incremental change. So for more information on what happens on each of these dates, there is a settlements computer-based training that is on our Learning Center, and there's a lot of different information on our settlements page. And a key point to make is that late meter data impacts the system, and it impacts everyone else based on because everything is tied together. The market everything got optimized together, and then there are payments, so it could affect the data that comes in, could affect, from a generator, could impact the load that used that generator based on the data that comes in from the meters. And it's also important to get it in on time, because you see that T plus 48B, that is the last date that you can turn in any kind of changes to your settlement quality meter data for that particular trade date without incurring rules of conduct penalties. And again, because it has such a detrimental effect to have late data, that's why we do have those rules of conduct. And changes can be made up until T plus 172B, but there would be, again, rules of conduct penalties that could be incurred. So how does the ISO get paid? The GMC, or Grid Management Charge, is the vehicle through which the ISO recovers all of its annual administrative, operating, and capital costs from the entities that utilize the ISO service. The GMC was implemented with stakeholders and FERC to provide a simplified and transparent rate design that will increase clarity, predictability, and simplicity. In June of each year, we review the ISO current financial condition with stakeholders and gather their input for the budget process for the next calendar year. Then we'll follow up with a meeting in October to review and discuss our draft budget before finalizing it and requesting our Board of Governors approval in December. So on our website, you will be able to find our budget and those grid management charges. We have market operations charges. There are just a variety of different service charges. So you could look on our website and find this. There are times also where there might be changes throughout the year, so that can be updated at times. All right, so we just got a couple of questions, slides left, but we'll go ahead and stop for questions on our post-market processes. Lindy, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Another question that has come into the queue. What is the approximate dollar value of market transactions per month or quarter? And is there a peak season?
I do not have that information available, but I do know we have reports that have that, and so I will get that information and send a link out to everyone who's registered on today's call. So, like I said, I'm not sure what that information would be. You can find that information through our Department of Market Monitoring, so I will get a link to the report there. You can probably find other data on OASIS, and I'll show you where OASIS is here in a moment. But I will have to look up that information and get back to you on that. As far as peak seasons, actually with renewables, that's also kind of in flux as well. There are, with a lot of the renewables, a lot of our peak demands are now moving more towards the fall time frame, where it used to be summer. And so there's a lot of data on that, but it is kind of a shifting target as to when there are peaks. You also have winter, when things get a little colder and you've got more heaters on. But I'll send information out to everyone that's registered on this call with a link to that information.
Okay.
Any other?
We do have another question. Is CAL-ISO only funded by the GMC grid management cost? Is that the only funding?
Yes. Yeah, that's how we get paid, is through our grid management charge. So all those different financial transactions that are happening, there are bid segment fees. So each entity, if you submitted a bid segment or a bid with 10 segments, there's a fraction that's associated with, each one of those, a fraction of a penny that's associated with each one of those bids. And then again, there's the market charges. There's those inter-SC trades that's a financial service, so there might be some payments there. So we're, like I said, we're not for profit. The GMC is where we get our funds for the different activities and services we provide, and those are found on your settlement statements and invoices. So you would see those as line items as well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
The meter data that we are talking about is not like the one I have at home. Where is it collected?
These are from the different resources. So these are the kind of the hubs, if you will, and those will be submitted by the different registered entities. They have to go through testing, so it could be at a generating station, the load serving entities, like the participating transmission owners. They're different meters. That's where we're looking at it. It's a collected amount. So there is a process that the entities go through, that the resources go through to connect. There's different tests to make sure that telemetry is coming out. But as far as connecting down to your individual houses, that's not us. We connect on a higher level.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Another question. How do market participants pass on GMC costs to retail customers? I
have no idea on that. That's we don't set rates for any of the utilities or their consumers, so I wouldn't be able to answer that one.
Okay. And another question. What are the potential fines if data is sent late?
There are different values, and off the top of my head, I want to say it's like $1,000 a day for late meter data, but I will have to verify if that's still the correct amount. But I believe that that's it, and it's for each day that it's late. But I'll verify that that's the price and add that to the email.
Okay. And that is our last question in queue.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and finish up by showing you where you can find more information, because I know this is a very high level. There's a lot more that you're probably interested in. So on our California ISO website, you see the top tabs. There's information about us, how to participate, how to stay informed, information on our planning, market operations, rules, and also ISO and Espanol. So there's all those different tabs where there's information located under. You also see on the screen there's the monthly stats. That's a place where you can go to find a lot of information and breakdown of what the resources are, and what capacity is, all that different current demand, our forecasted peak, what types of renewables are being integrated and used, what percentages. So you see that kind of information. So the monthly stats is a good report that you can look at to get information. We also have today's outlook, but then there's also key topics, information about us becoming a reliability coordinator. If you're interested in that information, there's a link to that on the left-hand side. Also in the middle, you see our calendar, so you can open that up and look at all the different events, all the stakeholder events, and shows which ones you can participate in. Most of ours are open to the public. There are just a few, if it's a board, that might be closed. So there's a lot of good information on our website. You can find out more about the EIM on the Western EIM website, and that includes under resources. You can find some computer-based trainings that our team has produced that will give you an overview of EIM, and then there's information about where we're going with EIM. If you want to hear more about operations, we do have a couple of presentations. There's links there that you can watch, interviews with one of our system operators as well as a market operator. It just kind of gives you a day in the life, and it's shot from our control room, so you get an idea of what our control room actually looks like and sounds like, because it's a little bit noisy. I mentioned Oasis a couple times, where you can find more data. So Oasis is our open access same-time information site. It provides public access to a variety of transmission system data. So it's got a lot of data, but unless it's proprietary information or confidential, you would be able to find this on the web. It's just on Oasis. It's just not going to give out any kind of market advantage data. So there's a lot of good information, reports that you can find, prices, information on system demand. Ancillary services, someone asked about that. You can find information about ancillary services on Oasis, as well as congestion revenue rights and public bids. So there's a lot of good information there that you can research, and you can get there from our main page. We also have today's outlook, so you can get there from our main page as well. This allows viewers to quickly see changing patterns of supply and demand, forecasted and actual peaks, energy supplies by resource types, real-time energy prices, renewable energy production. There's an updated net load graph that depicts daily system ramps, and that's reflecting the changes that are occurring on the power supply system. And and that's important as renewables become the dominant supply resource. It's like, what are those changes looking like? This page is available by clicking on today's outlook, but you can also find it on our app. You can link to this on your app or get it through your Google Play or Apple Store, depending on your phone type. And that's a good way to get that kind of information, as well as alerts that we mentioned before, like flex alerts. Another thing that would be very good for you to sign up for are daily briefings. So this has a lot of information. There's a lot happening at the ISO and in the industry in general. So to stay up to date on the information, sign up today for the ISO's daily briefing. This is a once-a-day summary email of market announcements. So it's market notices. It also provides comprehensive summary of the ISO news and activities, including announcements of upcoming calendar events, regulatory filings, and any new or enhanced features added to the ISO website. And we are going to be going through a major change of our website in the next year, so you can keep abreast of that. But that is a good one to sign up for, because it will give you a once-a-day summary of what's going on, or if a meeting is canceled. So it's a good one to check out. We also have our news website. We're going to find up-to-date information. Since the ISO is the vanguard of transition to renewable energy, a lot of the world's eyes are on us. They're looking at us for innovation, technology, and strategies for greening the grid. So you're asking about, someone asked about greening the grid earlier. We have our public affairs and media relations. They're at the heart of the ISO's mission to inform, educate, and promote the clean, reliable electric system and efficient market for the future. So there you see we've got a media hotline that you can get information from. You can also click on our news page and get information. You can also get that information on what we're looking at for greening the grid based on today's outlook, and that's a good place to go. We also have a dedicated developer site. So to enhance our customer service and simplify doing business with the ISO, we provide a comprehensive website for IT developers that consolidates the technical documentation network developers need for the ISO's application programming interfaces, or APIs, and it allows the developers to find connectivity instructions, interface definition files, sample code, URLs, FAQs, a Get Started guide, along with a glossary of acronyms and technical terminology that are common in specification documents. So if you are someone that's responsible for the IT development or connecting with the ISO grid, this is a good source to sign up for. and become part of that community. All right. And the last page I'm going to show you is our Learning Center that I mentioned before. A lot of you might have already been here when you signed up for attending this class. But we are committed to providing our customers with a broad menu of high-quality training courses on the ISO market functionality as well as individual market applications. So these courses are organized into areas of focus or tracks that are designed to be an industry resource for market participants and the general public to learn about electric grids and markets and the ISO's role in the electricity system. We are continuing to evolve our training programs and enhance our training materials to better meet the various levels of experience, technical levels, and needs of our customers, and to make it more user-friendly as an experience. We are creating more computer-based trainings and learning bursts to break down some of these complicated subjects into bite-sized, manageable pieces. So please keep an eye on this page to find updated content and learning activities. So again, we've got the different tracks, and we've got a lot of different CBTs. We have even more than what located up there right now on the page, and we have more that are coming out. So this page is a really good place to find different learning information, and like I said, we'll continue to update this as we innovate our training programs. All right. So that's my last slide. We'll open this up for any last questions before we conclude today's session.
We do not have any chat questions at this moment. I will remind all audience members as well to press #2 on your keypad if you would like to enter yourself into the queue. If there are any final questions, please submit them via chat. We'll give it just a moment. Okay, we do not appear to have any questions, but many thank yous for a great presentation.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and we'd like to hear more from you. Like I said, I'll get back to you with the questions that I was not able to answer with more detailed information. But if you have any questions about anything that was presented today, again, you can check out our website, or you can send questions to customertraining@californiaiso.com. And again, this presentation and the slide deck with the links will be posted this afternoon, and so you'll be able to see this updated slide deck. And then this presentation that's been recorded will be posted in about 3 to 5 business days. As soon as it gets processed, sent to us, we will get that posted, and so you can either listen to pieces of it again or share it with some of your coworkers that were not able to attend today. But I thank you all very much for your time, for your attention. I hope this got you started on some information with the ISO, but please don't hesitate to contact us to point you in any other direction for more information. With that, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and that concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.